everybody. Today I am bringing you a first impressions video for Moonrakers right here. Just a reminder that these first impressions videos are not full teaches, they are not full reviews. They are videos that I put out when the game first lands, although I'm starting the series, so I'm still kind of catching up with a few November and October games. But in general, this series is published when a new game lands, either when the Kickstarter delivers or the games hit retail for the first time. And this is my way of trying to put up a video very quickly to show you some of the gameplay, some of the mechanics, and give you an idea of whether or not you're going to like this game and whether or not it's a game for you before the full review videos have come out. You know, before there's been a lot of time. Just something quick and fast so you can get a look at it, possibly when there aren't too many other videos up. And I've got a lot more games coming up in this series until I sort of get caught up. So with that in mind, let's go over to the table. I'm going to show you the game, how it plays a little bit, some of the mechanics, and then I'll come back to this setup and I'll tell you what I think about it. So the first thing I want to show you is this box, which has a great insert. So when you open it up, you're going to see the rule book here. You have the main boards that you'll need to set up various card markets. You'll have the player boards, and there was this sort of comic book that came in, so I tend to put this on the bottom just so that these take less damage. And then here you're going to have the contents. So you've got all 5 of your ships. For the sake of this explanation, I'm just going to use the purple and blue ship. You've got spaces in the insert that hold the hazard dice, the 3 coin value coins, and the 1 value coins. And then you have all of the cards that you're going to be using for the various player hands in here. And I don't know if you can see this, but there are little icons right here telling you what each of these different divisions of cards are. So when you are expanding your deck during the game, you can just easily reach for the card that you need. And then over here, separately, you've got the 4 decks that you'll be using out on these boards. You've got the crew deck, the ship parts, the contracts, and the objectives. Now, at the start of the game, and it says right here on the player board, if you can see these icons, it tells you what cards specifically that each player will get in their starting hand. So that is these cards. This is a starting deck, really, because it's a deck builder. So you're going to shuffle this up, draw 5 cards, and that'll actually be your starting hand. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over the different types of cards that you have here. Well, whenever you're doing a turn and you're pursuing a contract, you only get 1 action. So that only allows you to play 1 card. But if you play a reactor card, that will give you 2 more actions. And it's even presented in the rulebook saying that you could build a sort of card tree and then use the corners to show where you have more actions. So if I play this reactor with my 1 action, it gets me 2 more actions. That's what the reactor card does. The thruster card will allow you to draw 2 more cards up from your draw deck. Now, once you do this, you only have 1 action left. So maybe you play another reactor card, which would then allow you to play 2 more cards. So one could be a damage, and this will contribute damage to the contract, some of which require damage. And you will have a shield, which allows you to block a hazard dice. At the start of a turn, when you're fulfilling a contract, you're going to be rolling these dice depending on how many of these little bars show on the card. So however many bars are there, you're going to roll that number of hazard dice. And if you're doing this contract, you'd roll 3 hazard dice. So the damage card will do 1 damage. The shield will protect you from the damage. And the last card that you have in your starting deck is this. This is a miss card. It basically just clogs the deck. And if there's any way to get rid of these, you probably want to do that. Okay, so those are the cards that you are going to be working with, and I'm going to explain how you work with them in a moment here. But at the start of the game, you will shuffle up your starting deck, which will have 3 reactor cards, 2 of those thrusters, 2 shields, 2 1 damage cards, and a miss. Now, in general, the key to this game, really, because you only get 1 action per turn, is chaining those reactor and thruster cards. The reactor cards allow you to get more actions, and the thruster cards allow you to draw more cards. If you can't do either one of those, or generally both together, often several times, you're not going to be able to do much on your turn. But let me show you the way the rest of these cards are set up in the markets and the way they work. So at the start of the game, you're going to deal out 3 of these crew cards, and they all have this little purple symbol on them that represents crew. You'll deal out 6 of these ship part cards to create a tableau. And you'll deal out 8 of these contract cards. And then at the start of the game, everybody will take 3 of these objective cards and pick 2. So these will be things like play no damage cards but complete a kill contract anyhow, complete a rescue contract alone, or complete a contract with 2 or more hazard dice targeting you. So maybe this time I would take the fire support and not keep that one and return it to the bottom of the objective deck. But that would give me 2 of these objective cards, and then whenever I fulfill one of them, I immediately get a prestige point. And I would keep them tucked under the objectives tab on my player board. Now you've got a victory tracker over here. It's just kind of whoever wins 10 points first will win the game. In general, you're going to win prestige points by completing those objective cards and by completing contracts. And the ones that are out here right now show 3 prestige points, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 2, 1. So whenever you complete one of those contract cards, you'll get that many prestige cards. Now on a turn, you'll start the game with 2 money as well. On a turn, you'll start your first turn with 5 cards here. And then there are essentially 2 choices that you can make on your turn. You can either select to do one of these contracts, or if there's nothing that you can do, you can opt to stay at the base, which means you will take 1 coin. You will draw 2 of these objectives and keep 1, so you'll get 1 more objective card. And you can cycle out one of these contracts and put a new one in. So it gives you a little something to do if you can't complete a contract. If you want to complete a contract, or that you feel that you can, you're going to select one of these contracts. So the problem here is often finding one that you can do alone, or even finding one that you can do with 1 player. So, or in a 2-player game, finding one that you can do with 2 players. But let's see. Here's what I started with in my starting hand. So I've got a reactor, I've got a thruster, which will allow me to get some other cards in my hand. I've got 2 shields, I've got a damage card, and that's what I've got. Now, what do I have to that I could complete over here? I would need to draw up 2 more thruster cards to be able to beat this one, which seems unlikely, And even if I did, I wouldn't have the actions to do it. I won't even be able to come close to doing one of these contracts on my turn. So let's say I did a passing turn there, where I would take a coin, pick a new objective, cycle these over here. My objective might be fail a contract as an ally, or acquire 3 Cormac ship parts for your ship. So let's say I took this one, put it under here, put my rejected one at the bottom of the pile, and then I could find a really hard contract, cycle it out, and put a new one in its place. Boy, that one's not much easier, is it? This generally is the problem with Moonrakers, is that there is so often nothing that you can do on your turn. No contracts that you can complete by yourself. And in a 2-player game, there is even a variant that has you creating a deck of 15 cards, and you'll put those cards out here, and then you can pay from the rewards to take those card actions. The problem is it doesn't give you the benefit of the card. And if you were to use these crew members as well, you can't actually do the powers on them. So you'll just be able to use their iconography to fulfill what's needed for this contract. And I have found in my plays that it's not helpful. So essentially the solo mode and the two-player game are borderline broken, in my opinion. And I think that could have been fixed if they would have had a different set of contract cards, or maybe certain contract cards that you would pull out, with the really, really difficult ones on them. And they do allow you to actually pull out anyone with the 4 hazard dice requirement for a 2-player game, but there are only 3 of those cards in the whole deck, and that still doesn't really solve the problem. But let me find you a better example. Okay. So let's just try with my new hand to do one of these contracts that has come out. And again, I'm not playing the solo game right now. I'm just trying to show you a sample turn. Okay, so I have 2 reactors, I have a thruster, and I have a damage card. So let's say I decided to go for this card. Okay, so here's how this works. To complete this card, I need to play down cards that have all of these icons on them. Now, and I need to roll hazard dice for however many icons are here. In this case, it's 2. So I take 2 high hazard dice, I'd roll them. In this case, I rolled 3 of these icons, which means I now need to have 3 shields in addition to 3 thrusters and 1 damage. And if I do this, I'll be able to get a prestige point, 2 coins, and a card, either a ship parts card or a crew card that I'll draw blindly from the top of this deck. Okay, so if I was attempting to do this, and this would be in a multiplayer game, basically, where I'm not getting help from anyone, I might put down a reactor card, which would then give me 2 more actions, as we discussed earlier. I could play a thruster, which will allow me to draw 2 more cards up. So I would shuffle my deck, draw 2 more cards. Okay, I can play another reactor card. And now I'm out of cards that will allow me to draw more. So all I can play are what's in my hand. So I could play this damage card, and I could play this shield card. And the shield card would allow me to block 1 of the 3 icons. But I still have 2 of them unblocked. And I missed getting this by 2. So I'm going to fail this contract. And not only that, I'm going to lose 2 prestige points for the 2 icons that I wasn't able to block. So I would actually lose 2 points on this track. And that would be my turn. So in an actual solo game, you're going to take these 12 cards that are listed in the instruction booklet. You're going to mix in 3 crew cards, and then you're going to shuffle this up. And on your turn, you will place out this 5 of these cards, and then you'll be able to pay to use these cards with either coins or prestige from your potential rewards. But if you're paying coins, the first card that you mark will cost 1 coin, the second one will be 2, the third one will be 3, and if you're trying to use one of these crew cards, it'll cost you a prestige off of the card. So they're rather expensive to use, and they're not actually very helpful. But if I was doing a solo turn, let's say I was trying to do one of these, and let's say, let me get a new hand up here. Okay, so I might start with a hand that looks like this. So I've got 2 reactors, 2 shields, and a thruster, and then I've got these cards that I can sort of pay access to. And here's what I have up here. So maybe I look at this and I think, well, it'd be nice to do something with a lot of reactors. And I do have 5 on this card, and I have 3 shields, but I only have 2 shields here. And I know that in my starting deck, I don't have any more shields. So I'm not going to have more shields. I can't do that card. What else looks possible? I could maybe do this card, but I would need to draw another thruster to be able to do it. And there's a chance that that could happen. I'd also have to pay for this thruster, so that would cost me 1 coin to do that. And that looks like... Oh, but if I did this card, I would also need a person, and the only person is here. And in order to do this, it would basically cost me a prestige from the reward, which means I wouldn't win any prestige for completing the contract, which makes doing it almost pointless. So let's say I tried to go for this card. Okay, so in order to complete this, I would need to place 3 thrusters, a damage, and however many dice I roll, which would be 2, the number of hazard icons shown, so it'd be 1. So to complete this contract, I would need 3 thrusters, I would need 1 shield, and 1 damage. So let's try to start this out. I'll play an action card, which gives me 2 more actions. I can play a thruster, which will give me 2 more cards. Then I could play another reactor to give me 2 more actions. And I could play a damage card to take care of the damage and a shield to take care of the shield, for that 1 icon. But I'm going to be 2 thrusters short. So even if I were to buy this thruster, I'm still 1 short. So I would fail this contract. And unfortunately, that's much how the game goes. You either just flat out can't complete a contract, and so you have to do essentially a passing turn, or you try to complete a contract knowing that you're going to need to draw specific cards to be able to do it because you don't have everything, and then you fail it. Which brings us to the kind of crux of this game, which is negotiation. Well, when you're playing with multiple players, you can negotiate for players to complete this card with you. In order to do that, you need to ask someone if they will come along and help you and try to, add whatever icons that you don't think you can play. And before, this has been negotiated, you'll need to decide of the rewards here what you're going to give to any other players that are helping you. So you can negotiate with them for any of the things on the card, but you can't negotiate with other things that you may already have on your player board. So you can't offer them money that you already have, or ship parts that you already have, or anything that you already have, cards or anything. It's all about the potential rewards. So maybe if I was going to do this card and I had, some of the thrusters and some of the shields, I might ask someone to come along with me and help me. And since this card would give 3 prestige and 7 coins, maybe I'd agree to give them 1 of the prestige and maybe 3 or 4 of the coins if they help me do this. At the end of your turn, you will have the opportunity to buy cards. And this is kind of another of the problems of the game with me, is that on the card, the iconography telling you the price is so tiny. So this card right here costs 6, 4, 4, and if I hold it up to you, you can see how small it is. So that is the cost of this card, and the costs of the card are very difficult to see from more than about 6 inches away, which makes it really hard to play this game. But those are the costs of the cards you can buy. So if you buy a person here, you will just take this card and you will put it into your discard deck, and then eventually it will get shuffled back into your draw deck and make its way into your hand. And the crew cards are pretty cool because they have various abilities that you'll trigger when you play them. However, if they're ever here during a solo player or a 2-player game, you won't actually get to use the power. You'll just have to pay 1 prestige out of your potential winnings to use the card as part of the purple crew icon requirement. These cards are a little different. These are ship parts. Now, when you buy 1 of these, it will go onto your player board where you have, let me put the player board over here. You have space for the player board to hold 4 of these. When you collect most of these ship parts cards, they're going to have icons. See, this one doesn't, but most of them will have icons on the card as well. So if you buy a ship part card, you're also going to go into the box for the game and you'll select whatever cards this card notes. So in this case, I would go to the base game and I would pull out 2 more reactor cards. I would put those in my discard deck, and then eventually when I reshuffled to do a new turn, those would cycle through into my draw deck and then eventually back into my hand. There are also some objectives that give you a point if you have a certain kind of these cards on your player board. You can always get more than 4 ship parts, but if you get a 4th after you have 4, it just means that when you take a new one, you'll need to discard an old one. That is essentially the game. Okay, so that was Moonrakers, and I think some of my opinions started to come through while I was describing the gameplay. Now, I actually put up a first impressions video for Moonrakers once already, and I had to take it down. And the reason for that is someone from the publisher reached out to me because I had been playing a 2-player game not using the 2-player variant. So I was playing it incorrectly, and the way I talked about the game, I was talking about it a little bit incorrectly. However, I don't think that's going to work in the publisher's favor because unfortunately now, after playing it correctly and looking at the game a little bit more, my opinion of the game has gone down even more, unfortunately. And I don't like putting out negative videos, especially for first-time publishers like IV Studio who produced Moonrakers. I think they've got another game in production already, The Veiled Fate, I believe it's called. And there's a lot that I want to like about the game. Like, I want to like this game. It's got a really interesting graphic design style. You know, it's kind of very representational and iconographic, almost abstract in the art style, right? You saw the art on those cards, like the thrusters and the reactors and stuff. And even though the people, the crew, had some very kind of wonky, abstract art, which I like. I like the design style of this game a lot. And I like the insert. I think the insert is fantastic, and I wish all games would have inserts that are as, easy to use and make kind of setup and teardown very, very easy, and everything's kind of right where it needs to go. It's great. The problem is in the gameplay, and specifically in the gameplay for the solo game or the 2-player variant. And I think that it is borderline broken at those player counts. And I don't like to say that. I don't want to say that lightly. I think to defend the game at those player counts, you'd really have to do a lot of backwards bending to kind of get to that assessment. But I think I think that essentially this game is kind of 1 or 2 design passes away from being really good, at least at those player counts. I think in order to make it better, they would need like a separate crew deck or certain cards that you pull out beyond just those 3 cards that have the 4 hazard dice. I think you would need to pull out a lot more cards to make it work at 1 or 2 players. And in fact, I think that there aren't really enough cards in the contract deck to be able to play a good game at 1 or 2 players. So that's a huge letdown and a disappointment. And, I thought the game looked really pretty. I love deck builders, and I knew that there was negotiation involved. And I am not hugely into negotiation games. I do not like Cosmic Encounter. And I think even Tom Vassell compared this to Cosmic Encounter, saying it's kind of like Cosmic Encounter with deck building. And that's not completely true, but it is somewhat true. It is a deck builder, and it does have negotiation. And I think this game will play fairly well from 3 to 5 players, especially at the higher player counts. At 5 players, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And that fun is going to come from negotiation. Being like, oh, there's no way I can possibly do this contract alone. Who's coming with me? And if you have a lot of people, you can try to choose players to do the contract with you that are not in the lead. So you can kind of have the lower players on that victory prestige track working together to try to catch back up to the top players. And I think in that case, with a few people at the table to choose from, the more the better, to, kind of negotiate and do these contracts together, I think that's where the game is going to get lively and really shine. The problem is just that 1 to 2 player count. And also, COVID is still a reality right now. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic. In a lot of places, including where I live in Los Angeles, people are still self-isolating. So I have no ability to play this game with more than 2 players. And it's a combination of things for me, right? I think I'm not hugely into the negotiation games to begin with. But I think if I could go out and play this game immediately with some friends of mine at a 4 or 5 player count, I'd be able to see how it plays at that count. Perhaps I'd like it enough to keep the game. My problem is, since negotiation isn't one of my preferred mechanisms or genres, it's not going to be a game I'm going to pull out all that often. And it's going to be a game I need to have work at a 1 or 2 player count. And as I said, this game to me feels borderline broken at a 1 or 2 player count. It's just not going to work. My fiance, Kristen, thinks the game is horrible and has refused to ever play it again, period. So there's that. So I won't be playing it with her. And I think her opinions are on the strong side, but she's not wrong. And the problem is, in that 1 or 2 player count, most of your player turns, 75 to 80% of your player turns, are going to be you sitting there going, can't do any of these contracts. Okay, maybe I could do that one. All right, I'm going to try to do this one. Can you come with me and help me do this one? And the player looks at their cards and they're like, no, I can't. I don't have the cards to help. I can't help. So you say, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. I guess I'm doing a passing turn again. And that's like 80% of your turns are just passing, taking a coin, getting another objective, and cycling one contract out. But when there are only maybe 1 to 3 contracts on the board that are doable for 1 to 2 players, it's, in fact, often there's maybe 1 of those contracts that is doable with 1 player, and maybe 1 to 2 other contracts that's doable with 2 players. Theoretically. Now when you look down at the cards that you have and the amount of cards you're going to be able to draw up, you realize you can't do any of it. And essentially that's the 1 and 2 player game, is realizing there's nothing I can do every turn. And it's not a pleasant gaming experience. It's a very frustrating gaming experience. I think part of it is in the central design, which is that, when you're trying to complete a contract, you only get 1 action. So you need those reactor cards and you need those thruster cards to help you draw cards. But if you play 1 reactor and then 1 thruster on top of it, you're drawing 2 more cards and now you only have 1 action left. So you can only play 1 more card unless you play another reactor and another thruster. Then you'll get 2 more cards and again, you'll only be left with 1 action. So there's so very little to do in this game, and there's so few avenues to get more actions, and they're so kind of hampered with the card structure. I think maybe if they'd had the reactor card gave you 3 actions and the thruster card allowed you to draw up to 3 cards, the game might be a little more functional. But I'm not in the habit of house ruling games. I don't want a house rule a game. I don't want to have to be an armchair game designer to try to make a game work that doesn't work by itself. So I want a game that's actually going to play properly out of the box. I don't want to have to fiddle with it to make it playable, which means that for all intents and purposes, as far as I'm concerned, at a 1 to 2 player count, this game does not work. With the way that the game is built, with those action and thruster, with those reactor and thruster cards, I think it still can play at those higher player counts, because if you get enough people collaborating, you don't all need to do a ton of actions. Maybe you only are each playing a few cards, 3, 4, 5 cards. Even 5 cards can be hard to get to in this game, to be able to play 5 cards. And some of those contracts require 10, 15 cards. At the higher player counts, the game may play fairly well. It may be fairly fun. I'm never going to know this. I mean, I have an idea that that's true. But I have no desire to hold on to this game to find out in 6 months if the game is going to play well at that player count and be fun. And part of that too is just my gaming groups. I tend to play more heavy Euros and stuff like that. So this isn't going to be a game that I'm that excited to hold on to for 6 months just to see if it plays okay. So it's with a heavy heart that I have to give Moonrakers I'm not rating it, but if I did, I'd be giving it a very low rating. And I'm recommending that people not get Moonrakers unless this is a game that you're going to want to play at a higher player count, and you are a fan of negotiation and deck building you think will be right for your game group. In that case, by all means, go for it. But there are just too many contingencies of player counts that are required to make the game fun and to make it work. And that's disappointing. I think more games need to be honest with themselves and with their packaging and marketing. And if it doesn't really work at a 1 or 2 player count, just put 3 to 5 right on the box. I've got this game Irish Gauge right up here. It knows that it doesn't play at a 1 or 2 player count, and it says right on the box 3+. And I'm actually going to be playing it tomorrow online with some friends because I want to be able to evaluate it for my best of 2020. That is a game that I'm not even going to try to play at a 1 or 2 player count, and I knew that it didn't play at a 1 or 2 player count when I bought it. I just like train games, and I have friends who like train games, and I knew that like we'll eventually be able to get this to the table. Moonrakers is a game that I thought was playable at a lower player count, and despite the fact that it says it on the box, I disagree with that. I don't think it really is playable at a 1 or 2 player count. So in closing, I mean, it may still be a game for you. It is not a game for me, and it makes me a little sad to find that out. It's going onto my sell pile, and that is the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you like the video, maybe give it a like, and then you can hit the alarm bell if you want to be notified whenever I put out more videos. I will see you soon in the next video. Take care. Bye.